Directed energy weapons is something straight out of science fiction. Buck Rogers would have been proud to have something like this. It's a focused, highly energetic, ranged set of weapons that damages its targets, and it includes lasers, microwaves, sound beams, and particle beams. Directed energy weapons are dangerous, discreet, and powerful. I'm Sergey Brown, and this is the Crash Cart Rule.
Crash Cart Rule. Crash Cart Rule.
You know, this is a podcast about life, liberty, and the pursuit of some pretty crazy stuff. So hold on to your tinfoil hat, pull up a comfy chair, and explore with me conspiracy theories, politics, weird happenings, and some plain hard-to-believe true stories. Today, we're talking about directed energy weapons, D.E.W. They are probably the scariest weapons on the planet, a military boogeyman. So yes, you really should care about directed energy weapons. Welcome back to the Crash Cart Rule. It's another wonderful episode, and today we're talking about directed energy weapons. A lot of people think that it's just Star Wars that Ronald Reagan mentioned, where lasers are fired, but it's much more than that. Microwaves, particle beams, sound waves. It is a technology that is frightful. Today, my guest is an ex-NSA security intelligence analyst. She worked there from 1982 to 2010 and then was fired in an illegal whistleblower retaliation for trying to report what appeared to be treason within the managerial ranks of the Weapons and Space Directorate in the NSA. Welcome, Karen Stewart.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure.
It's a heck of a world we're in right now, isn't it?
Frightful. I mean, it's just, I always say, when we hear stuff from the government or things of other governments that they're actually doing, I always think, oh my goodness, what aren't they telling me?
Oh, that's true.
Right?
That's absolutely true. It certainly is. I mean, we're almost at the point where the people in the Soviet Union years ago, of course, Russia is not the Soviet Union anymore, but the people of the Soviet Union said they would listen to the news to hear what they weren't being told.
Oh, right.
So you hit it right on the head.
And now, we know that BlackRock owns huge portions of our news companies, all the way from the Hearst Corporation to the Fox Corporation, MSNBC, CBS, NBC. It's in China and Russia are big investors in those companies as well. And it almost feels like propaganda anymore. And if you step out of line, you get canceled.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're looking at China influencing Hollywood and telling them what kind of movies they should make or what they will be allowed to say or not say. And then you have to think, what? Communist China?
Right.
I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, he tried to get monopolies to be illegal, because you don't want to take over the entire food, production business or anything else. It's not good to have a monopoly.
Right.
But we have tended toward that for decades. And this is what we are basically encountering is this megalopoly, this mega, corporation that seems to have, it's like an octopus, one octopus that owns everything, even though the arms look different, but they all connect back to the same octopus. And they're all basically trying to pound us into the ground to make us think and act the way they want us to.
Yeah. And I always ask myself, to what end? Are they driving up the stress because they know that stress dramatically, it can trim 20, 25 years off the average human's life? Or are they driving up the response rate and trying to deaden us in our reactions to something that they're about to do or are currently doing that we don't know about? What is that end game is always the question that I'm asking.
Well, I think we've seen it before. I mean, with the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks basically went to the peasants and tried to scare the heck out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Oh, you've got to support us because we'll change the government over and we'll free you." Well, at the time, the royal family was actually in the process of transitioning the monarchy, which is very strict. The king says, "You're dead, you're dead."
Right.
They were transitioning their monarchy to look like the British monarchy,
mm-hmm.
which was, I believe, a constitutional monarchy.
Yep.
Where they were figureheads, but the real governance was done by the people.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to transition the Russians to that. It scared the heck out of the Bolsheviks because they said, "Oh, if we miss this window of opportunity, we'll never be able to enslave the Russian people to socialism."
Trotsky, I mean, he saw it. He was a huge fan of that change until he got into it. And then all of a sudden, when he saw who Stalin really was, Lenin, he completely, he started the Bolsheviks and that revolution.
Well, the interesting thing about the Bolsheviks, too, is that Bolshe in Russian means more. And they were opposed by what they called the Mensheviks, which Menshe means less. And the Bolsheviks were using kind of sleight of hand because they were actually the minority, but the name made it sound to the peasants like they were the majority.
Right.
And that their opposition was the minority, which was exactly opposite. So that is a trick to make people jump onto the bandwagon they think is going to win. And we see that kind of happening now with false polls. Oh, everybody thinks that this or that. And you're supposed to go, "Oh, well, I guess I better think that way too." And it's not at all true.
Right. It's just one big psyop operation to control people's thoughts, the thought police.
Oh, exactly. And they count on a huge number of people not wanting to stand out, not wanting to look like they're different. A lot of people are, they want to basically look like everybody else, not make trouble, that type of thing. And they're kind of scared to say an idea if they think it goes against the grain. So what these people want are sheep that are afraid to pipe up and say something different.
Right.
Kind of like the old fairy tale about the king has no clothes. Nobody wanted to say, "Well, he's walking down the street naked, isn't he?" They didn't want to say that,
Yeah.
So that's what they're trying to do, is get you into proper think, into political correctness, which, by the way, was created in communist China.
Mm-hmm.
You were punished for ideas that you had and expressed, and then somehow that made its way over here. And then we've got a group of people who think that's a wonderful idea, don't say anything differently than we've been taught. Because we've, basically hung on to this little group that tells us that if we just follow what they say, that we're automatically geniuses and we don't have to study, we don't have to research, we're just automatically geniuses, and we like that.
So do you think that the 5G rollout is part of this plan with using it as a directed energy weapon to create that space in the brain that the governments can influence or literally just beam in what they want you to think as a weapon?
That frequency is a weapons frequency. It was a weapons frequency way before it had anything to do with telecommunication.
Wow. So the rollout is kind of in congruent to the COVID. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. And those are two very similar symptoms. Is it a ploy to blame COVID when it's actually the rollout of a weapon system that's being used against the population of America and the world?
Well, some of the people who died in China, it's been found out that they died immediately. I mean, they just absolutely dropped dead when 5G was turned on.
Wow.
Because took every bit of oxygen out of their blood in a split second.
Okay, that is just terrifying. We're coming up on the end of our very first segment. Boy, that went extremely fast. But don't go anywhere, because we're going to be talking more about 5G and what it does to your blood, more about directed energy weapons with my guest, Karen Stewart, right here on the Crash Cart Rule. Check out our other episodes at thecrashcartrule.com. I'm Sergey Brown, and we'll be back after this. It is nice to have you back right here on the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Sergey Brown, and if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Karen Stewart today. She is a former NSA security analyst. She worked for them from 1982 until 2010, when she was unceremoniously let go because she exposed the treason. Now, Karen, we were just talking about 5G, and you were mentioning that in China, some of the Chinese just literally fell dead as soon as the China 5G apparatus was turned on because of something in their blood. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Well, this isn't my research at NSA because I wasn't at NSA at that time period. But what I have read in the interim is that these people who seem to have dropped dead, and people attributed it to COVID, they actually dropped dead from the 5G taking the oxygen out of their blood in a split second.
Wow. I heard also that 5G resonates graphene oxide at a very dangerous frequency where they can actually program the graphene oxide as a nanobot, a nanoparticle, spray that in the sky in a chemtrail. We absorb it, inhale it, however it comes into our body, and it passes that blood-brain barrier. And then now they are sitting at free rent in our brains, literally, and they can turn 5G on and off as they please.
It's not a good thing. I mean, one of the reasons they have been doing chemtrails is that they enhance the ability of directed energy weapons to harm you because of what it is that you are breathing in.
Right.
So this is a good thing at all. And one of the reasons that Trump wanted to build a wall is not only to cut off the illegal immigration, which so often carried with it criminals and drug dealing and human trafficking, et cetera, which is bad enough. But there were reports that Communist China had military inside Mexico, and that they were basically, China had gotten contracts to build some of these 5G towers. They had used less than top grade steel, which unfortunately enhanced the 5G effect. And so they put them all over the country. And one of their tactics was at some point to turn on 5G from Mexico over the border into the United States. And if they did it in a certain way, at a certain strength, they could drop dead all kinds of people in population areas from the cell towers. So he had this wall specially constructed of materials that would jam or deflect anything that was fired over the border.
And now I understand that they're spending millions to take down parts of that wall that they can legally take down. Some they can't legally take down. They're still doing it.
Well, hopefully that'll be thwarted pretty soon, because I'm of the opinion that at some point in time, the military intelligence will announce that they have had to remove Biden because they found that there was voter fraud, and not only voter fraud, but it was aided by China. I think some of the people probably have read that the voter ballots that they used to stuff the ballot boxes, the mules did
right.
in certain areas. They were printed by China because the American real ballots had watermarks on there to show whether they are authentic or not. And all of these winning votes had no watermarks whatsoever. So this is, the military has investigated that and confirmed that. So at some point, this administration has got to be turned over.
Is the military too infected now, however, by the deep state and the deep state actors to be any benefit to the people? We hear a lot about how, yes, we found this information. Oh, of course, Hunter Biden's laptop is real now. Yes, we have voter fraud and we can prove it, but nothing seems to ever get done.
Well, there's got to be a lot that's being done behind the scenes, or you're going to throw the United States into a civil war. People are going to attack each other. I mean, the guy with this political belief may go across the street and hit the guy with the other political belief in the face with a shovel. So I've never ever seen our country so politically polarized as it is today. Oh yeah.
And I think that that's on purpose. And I think that the left and the deep state are pushing for a civil war because it solves any number of problems for them. Depopulation, it makes an unstable environment. And we all know that one of the reasons that foreign countries like their political, their population to kind of be caught off guard is because it's easier if you're worrying about feeding yourself or not getting blown up, then the government can essentially do whatever they want because nobody's going to be paying attention.
Precisely. I mean, that's what we're seeing now. I mean, this coming food shortage was concocted. I mean, I saw, a couple of videos by farmers saying that we're being told by the Biden administration to plow under our crops or we're not getting money for the crops for next year.
Insane. It's absolute insanity. I've got friends who are farmers and they have had a farm in their family for over 100 years. And thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. They're only planting 25% of their farm because they can't get the nitrogen and phosphorus and all of that, right?
Right. Yeah. And probably, there's a problem with the gasoline they use for their tractors and things like that too.
The diesel. And diesel is making it horribly expensive, but also because the government is telling them, and they have to do it. I mean, people don't realize that farmers literally gamble every year to stay alive. And the government pays them a subsidy, and either you do as the government says or you don't get your subsidy. And the government is saying right now, plow under your fields.
Mm-hmm. That affects not only us, but then the people who have cows, pigs, chickens don't have food for those animals. And then guess what? They have to slaughter them. So for a while, there may be a glut of meat, but then after that, you've got a very severely reduced number of livestock that you may never get the numbers back for like many years.
We saw that happen in 2019. And then in 2020 and 2021, the price of beef, chicken, and pork all of a sudden took a big bounce. I think that we're getting ready for an enormous bounce over the next year.
I think so too, unfortunately.
Well,
they've been predicting shortages through 2023.
Well, I hear that chicken's going to be up at $10 a pound. However, we're coming up on the end of our second segment. We're speaking with Karen Stewart. Now, when we come back, we're going to dive deeper into these directed energy weapons. And if you haven't had a chance, check out the crashcartrule.com for some of our former shows and a little bit more information. I'm Sergey Brown. This is the Crash Cart Rule. We are back right here at the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Sergey Brown. We're speaking today about directed energy weapons, talking to Karen Stewart. And Karen worked at the NSA, and Karen, what do you do now?
Well, like I told you, I was illegally fired for going to the Inspector General with what I thought should be investigated in regard to possible treason and espionage. And they panicked, and they tried to fabricate reason to fire me, and they ended up doing that after about 3 years. And I found out that NSA and other agencies basically are very they're using illegal criminal activity to harass whistleblowers like people would never in the world believe. I mean, they give whistleblowers a hard time,
right,
but you don't imagine that they actually engage in overtly criminal activity against them, but they do.
Edward Snowden told us about that too.
Yeah, and they basically cow any and all law enforcement to stay out of it. Like they have a reason and they have a right to tell them you don't have any more constitutional rights. So I went through that, and I found out that they also engage the fusion centers, the FBI fusion centers, in harassing people as well.
What is an FBI fusion center?
Okay. All right. I was about to get to that, but that's a good question. And, most people don't know. You're exactly right. Most people haven't the biggest idea. What the heck is that? Well, after 9/11, there were congressional hearings where they had the heads of the CIA, NSA, and, FBI, et cetera, before them in Congress and they said, what the heck happened? How did 9/11 even happen? And they gave them a song and dance routine about that pesky old Constitution that always gets in the way.
Seems to.
Which is baloney. And so they promised them, well, you know what? If we can organize a network of fusion centers where local law enforcement will have representatives from various federal agencies right there, maybe a fusion center per state or 2 or 3, depending on the size, like Texas or California might have 3. Then we can fuse information intelligence so that from the top down or the bottom up, we can see if there are bad characters in that state planning to do any type of 9/11 type of terrorism.
Right.
Well, they set all those up at the cost of billions of dollars to the taxpayer, yearly, and couldn't find any terrorists.
Oh, boy, that's rough.
Bummer,
Yeah. It's almost like they weren't looking for terrorists.
The Congress basically has several times asked them, what are you doing with the money if, in 20 years you haven't come across one terrorist whose activities, you thought were viable or that you've stopped? What are you doing? And they refuse to say.
And that's the problem.
They refuse to tell the oversight people in the Congress what it is they're doing. They say, it's national security. Well, if the Congress people can't know, then how are they oversight? How could you be oversight if you're told you don't have the clearance? So what this has turned into is a huge watch list scam. So what they do is they will put tons and tons of totally innocent people on the watch list. And this results in stories like the 84-year-old grandmother was pulled off the plane, or the 6-month-old baby couldn't go on the airplane, but his mother could. Just ridiculous stuff that we all rolled our eyes and said, those idiots. But it's worse than that. They are putting known innocent people on the terrorist watch list to bloat it, to keep their budgets high. And the thing is, they're sharing that money they get for fighting terrorists with locals. They're going to local police, local sheriff's departments and say, hey, basically, and I'm paraphrasing this, basically come in with us on this scam. We'll share the money with you. We're going to pick out, 10,000 people in your city to claim that they're terrorists. Then we're going to pay local civilian vigilantes to harass them, break into their house, kill their dog, spread around the neighborhood that they're pedophiles. And that's what is called the gang stalking mode.
Right.
So they've totally freaked somebody out. And the psychology behind that is to not only keep them off balance and thinking, am I crazy? Have I lost my mind? Or are all these people following me and doing this or that? Why? So if you report that to the police basically, either they're low enough that they don't know this is going on and they say, well, why would somebody do that?
So we know that the government has a long history of going after and violently taking care of whistleblowers and people that disagree with them. Was there any of that after you were a whistleblower at the NSA?
The people who get thrown onto the watch list, in my opinion, from having talked to hundreds and hundreds of them, the vast majority are innocent, non-federal workers. Anybody plucked off the street will do.
Right.
Now, some of them are targeted specifically because maybe somebody high up or somebody with connections wants a piece of property they have. Maybe they want their house. Maybe they want this or that. And so they want to cause as much trouble for them as possible in order to somehow to get that property or somehow to get that inheritance or somehow to get that intellectual property. So there is a very definite criminal element to this where people get targeted to steal from them. Other people, it's just vengeance. And I hate to say this, but I've talked to so many ex-wives who've been targeted by their husbands for not putting up with garbage. Right. I haven't talked yet to any ex-husbands whose wives have done that to them. But it's it manifests in so very many ways. I mean, one of the reasons a person can be targeted is because they maybe has specific genetics that some laboratory wants to test certain things on. I mean, people aren't only hit with directed energy weapons so that contractors, military industrial complex contractors can see how these weapons fare. Gee, what does this do to a black guy? What does this do to an Asian guy? What does this do to an old white woman?
Right. Body chemistry.
So that's all this. Yeah, they gather all this information. They go and tell their investors, oh, this works especially well on blah, blah, blah. And the investors throw their money in and they make more and more of these weapons. And unfortunately, they not only sell them to governments, but they will also sell them to like crime gangs or petty potentates in the Caribbean or, anybody who has the money, they sell these things to, which is reprehensible.
It's almost like we're watching a James Bond movie unfold in front of us where an evil corporate entity is now going to sell the most powerful weaponry to one of the worst people or groups because they get money from that, and then they get money from the government to fight that evil entity that they just created all that power for.
The perfect scam.
It is, absolutely. So how are they using directed energy weapons in this scam? Because, what it is the government is creating a problem that only the government can solve. And so if you say, oh, okay, we're out of terrorists, but we can open the borders, maybe get some in there, or we can take and say, you know what? Those patriots are the terrorists.
Bingo. It was bait and switch from the start.
It really was. So what do you think about this alert over in New York City about the nuclear attack and the preparations for that? Doesn't that seem, now that the border is wide open, doesn't it seem a little curious that all of a sudden they're saying, hey, we might have a nuclear attack here?
We've got some false flags in the planning, unfortunately. Now, whether they actually go through with like a tactical nuke or not, I don't know. I mean, you're talking about people who are desperate to control every smidgen, every iota of the United States and get their plans and motions for the New World Order and destroy the democracy, get all these people under control and eradicate a lot of them.
Yeah.
And their plans are being challenged and thwarted to some degree by the patriots. So would they pull out, 2 or 3 tactical nukes for cities? They might want to. I'm just praying that they don't succeed, because again, before Trump left office or left D.C., shall we say. Mm-hmm. He wrote I think it's PEAD, which is a top secret instruction to the highest military intelligence at the Pentagon to tell them, investigate, look into this election. If China helped steal it, then you know what to do. You have to gather the evidence. You have to start doing military tribunals. There have to be arrests by the military. You're not going to get police to do it.
Right.
And you've got to figure out some way to remove the usurpers and then reinstate the proper government. So that was left to the military, the highest military intelligence. And you were talking about, is our military divided? Yes, it is.
It is.
It is. Infiltrated, with different ideologies. You've got the patriots versus the neo-Marxists, and they don't even know they're Marxists.
Exactly. And here's the interesting thing is we have seen just in the last week, almost 60,000 troops are being summarily released because they won't take the jab. And that jab, I believe, is part of injecting you with things that can be controlled by these directed energy weapons.
If it doesn't kill you first.
Oh my goodness. I mean, people are dropping dead like crazy.
Yeah, I saw statistics saying that insurance companies are saying that they saw a 40% increase in sudden deaths.
Wow.
In 2021. Just for no reason. Just boom, gone.
That is incredible. Back to your point about tactical nukes, I'm not exactly sure tactical nukes are going to be the best way to do it. This is what I think, and you can correct me if I'm way off a base here, but I think what they're going to do is blame it on somebody that crossed the border and detonate dirty bombs in these cities, it won't do as much damage. It'll create enough death and mayhem and fear and panic that the government can then have sweeping new powers to lock the country down in a military aspect. And I believe that that's going to be our October surprise, where we'll go into my brain just does not work on this prednisone. Go into martial law. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's very possible because there was a scenario that we were presented with at NSA where China and Russia basically combined and said, well, let's just get on with this. We're going to invade. Russia will come from the east. China will go from the west. The Russians basically would say, okay, we're going to take the eastern United States. We're going to send our troops there. We're going to basically marry the troops off to the natives there, and we're just going to take over. And the Chinese said, well, fine, but we're just going to go in the west. We're going to kill everybody because we don't need the stinking people. We just want their land and cattle and all that.
I think that's what's going to be happening. I think that people are now becoming a bit too expensive to have around. We are going to continue this conversation when we come back. I'm Sergey Brown. This is the Crash Cart Rule. Check out thecrashcartrule.com for a lot more of our shows. We're going to be back after this with Karen Stewart. We are back right here with the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Sergey Brown. We're speaking with Karen Stewart about directed energy weapons. And, Karen, my brain simply is not functioning that well because I'm on prednisone. I'm on my last bit of prednisone. And my doctor this morning was saying that it actually interrupts, like cobs me up to where even the simplest words will sometimes get lost.
And we were talking about this a little bit before, and I said this is one of the first indications that people have that they're getting hit with an electrical field, right, or an EMF or a directed energy weapons, because it will actually jam your ability to think at times. And what it's doing too is it is giving you inflammation of the brain, which is very dangerous. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways you can figure out if you are being hit by something, you feel odd, you feel tingly, your brain isn't working right, right. And if you take a painkiller, it does nothing. But if you take something that is anti-inflammatory and you feel better, well, then you have to consider, oh my goodness, what's going on here? I mean, there are going to be other indications, like you're going to have cell phone problems, you're going to have computer problems. Maybe your dog or your cat is acting funny. You're hearing high-pitched whining in your ears. That's one of the indications that you may have been chosen out of the blue, or somebody had a vendetta against you and said, yeah, I'll lie and say that's a potential terrorist. So this is happening all across the United States. And unfortunately, since it is promulgated by the FBI has opened up offices all over the world almost. Right. And they are promulgating this kill your own citizen scam in other countries. So, I mean, a lot of people have said, well, shoot, I'm just going to leave the United States, and find out that they can't get away from it. It's
shocking how the FBI has been involved with the Tsarnaev brothers before they blew up the Boston Marathon. The shooter in Vegas, talking to him for months, and some people say almost a year before that, they were in contact with this latest shooter in Uvalde. It's almost like they are creating their own market, so we feel the need to have the FBI around and picking through our business. And then it gives the government the authority to say, oh, well, things are too dangerous now. So for your own safety, we're going to protect you by taking away your rights.
Oh, that's exactly it. I mean, the FBI is a Trojan horse. The fusion centers are a Trojan horse. They're all about enslaving the United States population. I mean, they long ago left giving a damn about us. I mean, they have their own agenda. Right now, the FBI itself is purging anybody who might be a patriot.
Yep. We have seen that start in government jobs, low-level government jobs, any number of years ago under the Obama administration. And then once Trump got elected, I have family members that work in government entities, and I have heard that people that were a bit too patriotic were essentially ushered out the door, and they brought in people that weren't as qualified, people that needed that job, people that couldn't do the job, and it's believed that they use that as leverage. The government doesn't care if you can do the job. What they care about is filling that seat, bringing that money in, and you do the job good enough. Now we have power over you because now you know that your job's on the line every day that you come to work. You're not so good that we need you. And it's frightful. And again, we have just seen the government use the vaccine as a reason to excuse tens of thousands of employees.
Yes. Well, let's go back for a minute to Stalin in the Soviet Union. He viewed us as a power that needed to be subjugated and defeated, but he said we can't do it. What we're going to do instead is, because our military is not up to snuff with theirs at the time,
right.
And so I think it was in the 1920s that he started to send people over to the United States as fake immigrants, and they were to infiltrate and then start to subvert the United States. And they actually created the ACLU. The ACLU was created to get anarchists that the Soviet immigrants were creating out of the United States citizens to get them out of jail for their activity against the United States. So they were created to protect the subversive activity that Stalin saw would eventually take down the United States and make it prey for communism or socialism.
That is
so. Our people have been under attack for decades and decades.
That is exactly right. I also believe, George Bush Sr.'s dad financed the Nazi Party. And it is my belief that the Nazi Party was moved into America and South America and deep into the Department of Education, where this Marxist approach took hold. They filtered out all of the red-blooded, American-loving patriots, if you will. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you have this open door to that communist structure. And it sure looks to me like we have taken that Soviet style, melded it with the Chinese style of oppressing the population for your own personal gain, keep as much of that financial energy as we possibly can, and crush any patriotism. And then the question becomes, how do you do that?
Well, you're seeing them divide us anywhere they can divide us. Men and women, genders, if you're born in this gender and you don't want to be that gender, then they're using that to divide people. They're using race, they're using religion, they're using everything they can to divide the people, because the last thing they want is a united front of the American, people
Absolutely.
saying, I'm going to do that. If you think of socialism/communism as a parasite, this parasite went into Russia, sucked it dry, and then they threw it off. They said, we're not doing this anymore.
Right.
And China hasn't quite gotten to that point. In fact, they're still gorging themselves on innocent people. But what the parasite is doing is moving over to the United States, because we had a capitalist society and we're very rich and prosperous, and we're a big fat host.
Yes.
So they had to come here to suck us dry, because it'll take maybe 100 years to destroy us. Then they'll move on again. So that's what's going on now. And unfortunately, so many people don't understand that politics has become war. It's not just politics. Some people say, I don't get involved in politics. And I say, well, you better, because this is the way that the war is being presented. This is asymmetrical warfare. That means it is war on any level other than picking up a gun and shooting you yet.
Because, well, I think that's the next approach, is to now get people to pick guns up and shoot each other in order to create that civil war, depopulate. The government gets to lock everybody down under martial law. And all of a sudden, you have a totalitarian government within days of that first skirmish under the guise of safety. We're going to make you safer because somebody did something. And I believe that that's one of the biggest reasons that they have developed these weapons, so they can spray it in the sky, feed it to you in your food, put it in your water, and then vibrate it to a point that it either irritates you enough, or they're actual nanobots that are receiving a message that, yes, you should go kill somebody, maybe go shoot up a school. And I'll tell you, Karen, doesn't it seem like this entire transgender argument blew up out of nowhere? And that's not normally how things used to be. It would kind of, grow and groundswell, and people would say, yeah, that's not right, and we're going to get behind it. But this, everybody says, you know what, this is ridiculous. Men in women's bathrooms, the whole pronoun thing is moronic on the base level, and it is absolute insanity when you look at it in the long run. And really, my question is, does it seem like we've been beamed in information almost as if that group of people magically gets this idea and says, I woke up one day and I just love the idea of taking the fight to the people about pronouns. And with that study of, we know what people eat, we know sleeping habits, we know what they drink. I mean, it's all marketing. That's what companies do. They study you. Facebook, Google, all the analytics of Apple. Everybody knows more about you than you know. They can literally trigger you by saying, we're going to dose this soft drink, and then we're going to use this directed energy weapon to affect whatever we put in that. So you do this.
Well, they have studied frequencies for decades, and they know what frequency will agitate you. They know what frequency will put you to sleep, meaning more so knock you out.
Wow.
They know what frequency will elate you. They know what frequency will make you suicidal. And one of my questions with all of the veterans returning from Iraq, that maybe the government didn't want to give pensions, and then we've got numbers saying that that group of soldiers is the most suicidal we've ever seen.
It's crazy.
Are they being hit with these frequencies to kill them?
I think they are. I would not doubt that they are sweeping. First of all, we know that soldiers that return, the vast majority of them no longer are liberal if they left as a liberal. They have seen what that does. And second of all, they're the ones that would be more than willing to stand up against an oppressive government. And third, they will cast their vote. And you can't have that. You can't have them speaking up, putting up any resistance.
No, I agree. I mean, one of the major reasons I think is to get rid of a class of people who know how to fight, and the other reason is they don't want to pay them.
Yeah, that's. I think you're right. That is that's a very good thought, and the amount of money that they're paying now, where is that money going? Because it's not the government's money, right? It's our money, so they have to hide it. And are they hiding it in these programs that then they turn on us as weapons?
Well, I think these programs have been going on for a long time because, we know they did experiments on like the Tuskegee people, and
right.
They've done atomic or nuclear tests, radiation tests on people who hadn't the vaguest idea they were being targeted for. It's just so totally despicable, and to try to say that we're better than the Nazis sometimes gets a little difficult because of what our scientists have done under the CIA. So I don't know that we can put anything past them. They seem to have gotten to the point where the secret government considers us property, and that they are the overlords as opposed to a democratically elected representative. I mean, there's a whole side of government that laughs at that, and we've got to get rid of that.
So what do we do to get rid of that? So what I'm hesitant to say that we have lost voting, but it sure seems like the voting structure has been severely compromised. What else can we do to get rid of that?
Well, I think you start standing up for yourself at the local level. I mean, sometimes some of these people have gone to like school board meetings and said, you guys need to quit, or we're going to fire you, or we're going to demand that you resign because you're not teaching our children garbage, Right. Or if they refuse, if you can't get rid of them, then you start teaching at home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one thing about the communists, I mean, I forget who it was. It might have been Stalin, who said that, if we can get your child, if we can teach your child until they're 8. That
was Karl Marx. Karl Marx. Yeah.
Yes.
Give me a child by the time he's 5 years old, I will own him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, the Bible says something similar too. If you teach a child the right way, up to the age of 8, then they'll always come back. They may stray, but they'll come back. So that's a very critical time in a child's mind to learn what's right and what's wrong. And what they're doing with all this gender stuff is absolutely totally destroying their ability to think critically.
Right.
To have kind of common sense. And they are occupying that part of the brain that should be learning common sense, logic, history, et cetera, et cetera. They're basically wasting it on frivolities, that are just insane.
Mm-hmm. We've seen this happen in Greece, in Rome, the Incan Empire. Whenever life gets too good for an empire, all of a sudden it implodes on itself. But the people that never pay the price are the ones at the very top. And I think that we're seeing that play out again in America. And unfortunately, it's only been, a couple hundred ye00
Well, I think the rule is that a lot of democracies more or less decline and fail at the 200 year or 250 mark, and that's where we are. So what happens is that the people who are representing you figure out a way to steal from the treasury and rob you blind and destroy the country.
It's happening. I mean, we just had a report out that Nancy Pelosi and her husband literally have a better investment record than Berkshire Hathaway, than BlackRock, than all of the great analysts out there. Nancy Pelosi and her husband, and interestingly enough, many of the first-year congressmen and senators also have phenomenal investment records. So it would stand to reason that they are making their deals and then passing laws to fill their own pockets.
Oh, yeah. And if you get in, I mean, they say that by the time you get to Congress or the Senate anymore, you've already sold out.
Right.
Because you can't get there unless you sell out. So here's another area where we've got to demand change. And one big thing is term limits, period. And we've got to demand that.
I agree. And I think we need to start teaching politics in schools, the value of it, and understanding how it works its way into every bit of everybody's life. So you better know how to use it and run for office.
Yes, that would be a very good idea, but you would also actually have to teach some psychology too, to teach people how they're controlled by groupthink and lie.
I agree. Psychology, politics, maybe a little reading and writing as well. Karen, thank you so much for coming on the Crash Cart Rule with me today.
Sure, my pleasure.
It has been a wonderful conversation. I look forward to many more with you. This is the Crash Cart Rule. Share this with your friends.